You have lived your entire life protecting something, a version of yourself that you believe must survive. Your image, your reputation, your safety, your rightness. And you have done everything to defend it. You have lied to protect it. You have hurt others to preserve it. You have compromised your truth to maintain it. And yet, despite all your effort, it is dying anyway. The version of you that you fought so hard to keep intact is dissolving, piece by piece, moment by moment, and instead of relief, you feel terror, because you have confused yourself, this constructed identity, with your actual existence. You think, if this self dies, you die. But what if the opposite is true? What if you can only truly live once this self is gone? This is the paradox at the heart of spiritual wisdom. To live, you must die. To find yourself, you must lose yourself. To know truth, the false self must dissolve. According to Sufi wisdom, there are two deaths. The first is the death you fear, the dissolution of everything you have built, everything you have claimed, everything you have defended. The second is the death you do not yet understand, the disappearance of the illusion that was never real to begin with. Most people spend their lives running from the first death. They build walls, they accumulate, they protect, they perform, they pretend, and in doing so, they guarantee that the only death they will know is violent, unwilling, filled with resistance and regret. But what if you chose the first death voluntarily? What if you laid down your arms before the battle was lost? What if you released your grip on this constructed self before life ripped it from your hands? This is not giving up. This is surrender. And surrender is the most powerful force in existence. Think about it. You are exhausted. You have spent decades defending a self that does not even want to be defended. You have performed a role that has nothing to do with who you actually are. You have worn masks so long that you have forgotten your face, and you wonder why you feel empty, why you feel lost, why no achievement ever satisfies. Because you are not building a life. You are building a tomb, a beautiful, decorated, well-defended tomb. And you are inside it, slowly suffocating. According to Sufi understanding, this constructed self is what must die. Not your essence, not your soul, not your capacity to love or create or grow, but the false self, the one that needs to be right, that needs to be seen, that needs to survive at any cost. That self is a ghost, and it haunts you. The death of this self is not destruction. It is liberation. But here is what makes people terrified. They cannot imagine who they are without this self. Strip away the roles, the achievements, the personas, the defended positions, and what is left? Emptiness? Meaninglessness? Nothingness? Yes, and that nothingness is the most fertile ground for truth, because truth cannot be built on lies, and your constructed self is built entirely on lies. Lies about who you are, lies about what you need, lies about what will make you whole. And as long as you are defending those lies, truth cannot enter. But the moment you stop defending, the moment you allow this self to die, something extraordinary happens. The space that was occupied by all your defenses becomes available, and into that space, truth pours in. This is the birth of something real, not the constructed self, but your actual nature, your essential self, the part of you that was never born and never dies, the part that does not need to prove anything because it knows it exists, the part that does not need to be loved because it understands it is love. According to Sufi wisdom, this death and rebirth is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process. Every moment, the false self wants to be reborn. Every moment, ego wants to reconstruct its walls. Every moment, the persona wants to reassert itself. And every moment, you have the choice. Will you defend it again, or will you let it die again? Most people make this choice thousands of times without realizing it. They die and are reborn countless times in a single day. One moment, they are their professional self. The next moment, they are their family self. Then their social self. Then their private self. All these selves competing, contradicting, demanding to be real. And in the midst of this chaos of false selves, there is something trying to emerge. Your actual self, your truth. And it is getting smaller and smaller because there is no room for it. The stage is too crowded with personas. But what if you cleared the stage? What if you stopped auditioning these different selves and simply stood naked, not physically, but spiritually naked, and asked, what is actually here? The answer terrifies people, because the answer is not nothing. The answer is everything. The answer is a presence so vast, so complete, so whole, that it makes all your constructed identities look like shadows. This is what Sufi wisdom calls fana, the dissolution of the separate self into the infinite. But this is not annihilation in the negative sense. It is annihilation of the false, so that the true can emerge. It is the death of the illusion of separation. Think about suffering. Why do you suffer? Is it because of external circumstances? Partially. But the deepest suffering comes from the collision between who you are actually and who you are pretending to be. That collision creates friction. That friction creates pain. And you spend your life trying to minimize that friction by building better lies, stronger defenses, more convincing personas. But the friction does not decrease. It increases because the gap between your truth and your performance grows wider every year. The only way to end this suffering is to stop the performance, to let the false self die, to step off the stage. And here is the miracle. When you do, the suffering does not increase. It ceases. Not because circumstances have changed, but because you have stopped struggling against yourself. According to Sufi wisdom, the self that must die is the self that is separate. It is the self that believes it is alone. That believes it must survive at all costs. That believes the world is against it. That believes it must prove its worth. All of these are illusions created by ego. But your actual self, your essential self, knows it is not separate. It knows it is part of something vast. It knows it is held. It knows its worth is intrinsic, not earned. And living from this place is not weakness. It is the ultimate strength, because when you are no longer defending a false self, you have infinite energy. Energy that was trapped in protection is now available for creation. Energy that was spent on performance is now available for presence. Energy that was lost to anxiety is now available for love. This is why great artists, great teachers, great healers all share something in common. They have died to themselves. They have released their grip on who they thought they should be and have allowed themselves to be channels for something larger. They are not performing. They are not defending. They are not trying to survive. They are simply allowing truth to move through them. But this is not mystical. This is practical. Because when you stop defending your false self, you become available. Available to see others clearly. Available to respond authentically. Available to create something real. So the question becomes, what would change if you let this self die? Not theoretically, but actually. What if tomorrow you woke up and decided that you no longer needed to be right? that you no longer needed to be seen, that you no longer needed to prove your worth? What would you do differently? Who would you become? How would you move through the world? For most people, this thought is terrifying because they have built their entire identity on these needs. Without them, who are they? And that is exactly the question that opens the door to truth. Because when you truly do not know who you are without your defenses, you are finally ready to discover who you actually are. The death of the self is not the end. It is the beginning. It is the moment when the curtain falls on the performance and the real drama begins. The drama of a life lived from truth instead of fear. The drama of a person who has nothing to prove and therefore everything to offer. According to Sufi wisdom, this death is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose every moment. You choose to either defend the false self or allow it to dissolve. Every moment you choose performance or presence. Every moment you choose survival or truth. And the remarkable thing is, once you have chosen truth even once, really chosen it, not intellectually, but in your actual being, you cannot unfeel it. You cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to pretending that the performance is real, because you have tasted something else. You have felt what it is like to stand without defenses, to be seen without masks, to exist without needing to justify your existence. And that taste is addictive, not in a destructive way, but in the way that once you have breathed clean air, you cannot pretend that smoke is acceptable. So here is what I want you to understand. You are not broken because your false self is dying. You are awakening because it is. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is finally being made right. Your false self has served a purpose. It protected you when you needed protection. It got you through difficult times. And now it is time to thank it and let it go. Because on the other side of this death is not emptiness. On the other side is your actual life. The life you have been too afraid to live. The truth you have been too defended to speak. The love you have been too guarded to give. And that life, that truth, that love is waiting for you. It has always been waiting. All it needs is for you to stop defending the false self long enough to let it emerge. This is the death that leads to birth. This is the dissolution that leads to wholeness. This is the surrender that leads to power. And it begins the moment you decide to stop performing and start being.